Welcome to the deep dive. We dig into the sources so you don't have to, pulling out the key insights to get you truly informed. Today we're looking at a name that, well, echoes through history, Moctezuma II. For so many, he's this figure tied inextricably to that dramatic clash of worlds, the Spanish arrival. Often painted quite simply, right? Either tragic or weak.
Exactly. And that's what we want to push past today. We've got this incredible range of sources, Spanish accounts like Bernal Diaz, but also really crucial indigenous chronicles like the Florentine Codex.
Right.
These let us peel back some of those layers. We're talking about Moctezuma II, the Huitlatuani, the Emperor of the Mexica or Aztec Empire. He ruled from about 1502, maybe 1503, up to 1520, and he presided over the empire at its absolute peak, territorially speaking. His reign just happened to collide, tragically, with that first European contact in Mesoamerica.
So our mission today is to cut through the noise, get past the myths. We want to understand the actual man, his policies, the huge challenges he was up against, and, crucially, how his story gets told so differently depending on who's telling it. The goal is for you to grasp the essentials quickly, have those aha moments, see the different angles, all without getting bogged down. Let's jump in.
Okay, so let's unpack the man before Cortez, before this storm hit. How did he actually get to the throne? What shaped him as a leader?
Well, his background is pretty significant. He wasn't just anyone. Great-grandson of Moctezuma I, son of an emperor, nephew of two more emperors.
Wow, okay. Imperial lineage.
Absolutely. He got the best education possible in the Kalmakak, the school for nobles. And even early on, he was apparently known for his discipline, his religious devotion. Plus, he was a proven warrior.
So not just a scholar or a priest?
No, not at all. He held top military ranks like Tlacaticutli and Tacacalcatl. He was even the main priest for Huitzilopochtli, the war god. That combination is key.
Military and spiritual authority combined. Precisely. He'd proven himself in battle, too. Rescued merchants, captured enemy commanders. He earned his stripes, you could say.
So a really formidable figure even before becoming emperor. When did he actually take the throne and what was his immediate focus?
The exact date is a little fuzzy, mostly cited as 1502. Some sources say 1503. There's even stone carving suggesting July 1503. But right away, his policy showed a clear vision. Centralization.
Centralization? How so?
He created, I think it was 38, new provincial divisions. He sent out bureaucrats, loyal administrators, and military garrisons. The goal was clear. Tighter control over tax collection, making sure imperial laws were followed, acting as local judges.
Interesting. And what about socially? Any big changes there?
Yes, and this is quite significant. He actively worked to widen the gap between the nobility, the Pippleton, and the commoners, the Mace Walton.
How did he do that?
He basically barred commoners and even nobles who weren't, let's say, from the absolute top tier from serving the royal palaces or holding high office. This was a break from his predecessors.
Why do that? What was the thinking?
It was likely about consolidating his own power, settling maybe some long-running tensions between different factions, nobles, merchants, warriors, defining everyone's place more rigidly.
And he also made the nobles move to the capital.
Yes, required them to live in Tenochtitlan permanently.
Right.
Probably to keep an eye on them, prevent any regional power bases from getting too strong. A classic move to centralize authority, really.
Okay, this is where it gets really tough for him, though. His reign starts, and bam, major problems. What happened?
You're right, it was far from smooth. Almost immediately, he faced huge natural disasters. There was a massive drought lasting several years, from about 1505 to 1508.
Years. That must have been devastating.
Absolutely. Widespread crop failure, starvation. One area, Totonicapán, was less affected and supplied some maize, but it was bad. Moctezuma and his allies had to basically empty their stores, raise tributes just to keep people alive.
That sounds desperate.
It was. Some nobles reportedly sold their own children into slavery for food. Moctezuma actually intervened, ordered the courts to free them and give them food. So he was actively trying to manage the crisis.
And it wasn't just drought, right?
Yeah. Then in 1514, severe snowstorms hit. More destruction of crops, property. The economic impact was huge. It led to policy changes too, increased tribute demands in some areas, but also the abolition of a form of serfdom, the Huitlatlacali.
So he's adapting, trying to cope. Did he make any other interesting moves during this crisis period?
Well, he negotiated with Tlatelolco, Tenochtitlan's sister city, gave them more autonomy, let them rebuild their temple, waived their tribute in exchange for resources. It shows him being pragmatic, trying to maintain stability even under immense pressure.
Amidst all this crisis management, he was also building, wasn't he? Creating symbols of his power.
Oh, absolutely. His construction projects were ambitious, to say the least. His own palace, the Tecpan, was enormous. Cortés himself was just blown away by it, called it indescribable.
Bigger than the National Palace today, I read.
Yes, significantly larger. Courtyards, suites of rooms, incredible gardens. He also built the Casa de Negrita, that windowless black room for meditation. Remains were apparently found in modern Mexico City.
Fascinating. A space for contemplation amidst the power?
And then there was the Totocalli, the House of Birds. It was basically a state zoo, a really prestigious one.
A zoo? What kind of animals?
All sorts. Beautiful birds like quetzals, eagles, parrots, but also predators, jaguars, wolves, snakes. It was meant for public entertainment, a display of the empire's reach and power over nature.
I heard some darker rumors about how the predators were fed.
Yeah, there are accounts, yes. Some suggest they were fed hunted animals, but others mention bodies of sacrificial victims, possibly even Spaniards after La Noche Triste, though the last part is, debated. Cortés eventually burned the zoo down in 1521.
It's a symbolic act. And the aqueduct.
Right, the Chapultepec Aqueduct, built around 1506. Crucial for bringing fresh water into the island city of Tenochtitlan. Ironically, the Spanish destroyed that too during the siege to cut off the water supply.
So, his empire was huge, the biggest it had ever been. But it clearly wasn't all stable. What was his approach to enemies, both outside and inside?
Well, he tried diplomacy initially. There's this story of him secretly inviting rival lords from Tlaxcala, Huejotzingo, places like that to his coronation. A power move, right? Show off his greatness.
It's a bit of psychological warfare.
Kind of, yeah. Flexing his muscles. But eventually, large-scale wars did break out. And it's interesting, initially, his biggest rival wasn't Tlaxcala, who we always hear about because of the Spanish alliance. It was actually Huejotzingo.
Okay, so he inherited this vast empire, but was he more focused on expanding it further or just holding on to what he had? It sounds like there were already rumblings.
That's a really key point. A lot of his military campaigns, maybe even most, weren't about conquering new territory. They were about putting down rebellions within the empire.
Ah, so maintaining control was a major effort.
Definitely. Places like Nopala, Icapatepec, Tlaxiaco in Oaxaca, these saw brutal suppression, massacres, executions. He also dealt with revolts way down south in Xoconosco. So yes, he did expand a bit, mostly in the southwest, Oaxaca and Guerrero regions. Conquered places like Sahel and Tototepec.
Tototepec, wasn't that the one where merchants were killed?
That's the one, yes. Around 1507, the story goes they killed some Mexican merchants, and Moctezuma's response was incredibly harsh. Reportedly massacred almost the entire population except children, took over 1,000 captives. He even briefly fought the Tarascan Empire, but that didn't really gain him anything, just high casualties.
So militarily very active then.
Extremely active, something like 73 military campaigns before the Spanish arrived, with victories in over 40 of them. One of the most militarily engaged monarchs, for sure. But again, much of it was internal consolidation or reconquest.
Okay, let's zero in on that rivalry with Tlaxcala and Huejotzingo. You mentioned a major battle.
Yes, the Battle of Atlixco. Around 1503 or 1507, sources differ slightly. It was a massive flower war, one of those ritualistic battles, but Moctezuma provoked it on a huge scale, sent something like 100,000 troops.
100,000? That's enormous.
It is. But despite the numbers, the Mexica couldn't break the Huejotzingo-Tlaxcala alliance. Moctezuma's own brother, Tlaquehuitlan, got surrounded and was killed, apparently asking to be sacrificed right there on the battlefield.
That must have been a crushing blow, personally and militarily.
Absolutely devastating. Reports claim maybe 20,000 dead on each side. Moctezuma was said to be beside himself with grief. It was a humiliating defeat for the empire, and it really weakened Huejotzingo significantly.
How did things play out after that disaster?
Well, the rivalry simmered. Moctezuma tried besieging Tlaxcala later. Then, ironically, the now weakened Huejotzingo actually asked the Mexica for help against a Tlaxcalan counterattack.
Wow, shifting alliances.
Totally. Led to another brutal, indecisive battle, massive losses, basically a stalemate. After that, around 1516, Huejotzingo just gave up on the alliance with Mexico. And that left Tlaxcala as the main bitter rival.
And that set the stage for 1519.
Precisely. That long, bloody history is why the Tlaxcalans were so willing to ally with Cortés against Moctezuma. The internal divisions were already deep.
And while all this external conflict is happening, a crisis brews right within the Triple Alliance itself in Texcoco. What happened there?
Yeah, this was another major destabilizing event. In 1516, Nezahualpilli, the ruler of Texcoco, a key ally, died suddenly, No clear successor.
I read one account that Moctezuma somehow betrayed him.
That account, mostly from a descendant named Alva Ixtliquixtli, isn't generally trusted by historians today. Most sources agree Nezhuapilli just died, perhaps seeking a more peaceful life. His funeral was huge, Moctezuma reportedly wept, but his death left a vacuum.
A succession crisis.
Exactly. 6 legitimate sons. Moctezuma threw his weight behind his nephew, Kakamatsin. A council voted Kakamatsin in, but another son, Ixtliquixtli, the same guy whose descendant wrote that controversial account, later he rebelled.
Why did he rebel?
He claimed Moctezuma just wanted a puppet ruler in Texcoco. So Ixtliquixtli raised an army, took some cities, even besieged Texcoco itself. It got ugly. Kakamatsin sent a commander to arrest Ixtliquixtli peacefully, and Ixtliquixtli had him publicly executed.
Things spiraled quickly. How did Moctezuma handle it?
He actually ordered a halt to military action, trying to prevent a full-blown civil war within the alliance. Eventually, the brothers agreed to split the kingdom of Acalhuacan, but the tension remained.
And this crisis didn't just disappear when the Spanish arrived, did it?
Not at all. It flared right back up. Kakamatsin, the ruler Moctezuma had backed, initially welcomed the Spanish, but when they imprisoned Moctezuma, Kakamatsin started planning an attack against them.
So Kakamatsin turned against the Spanish?
Yes, but Cortez pressured Moctezuma. And Moctezuma, incredibly, suggested that Ixtliquixtli, Kakamatsin's rival brother, be sent to arrest Kakamatsin.
Wow. Using the internal rivalry.
Exactly. Kakamatsin was arrested, and Ixtliquixtli effectively took over Texcoco. He then converted to Christianity and became a key ally for Cortez against the Mexica.
That's why he's such a controversial figure. Traitor or liberator?
Depends entirely on your perspective, right?
Yeah.
It perfectly illustrates the internal fractures that the Spanish were able to exploit so effectively.
Okay, so the empire is dealing with internal rebellions, costly rivalries, a succession crisis, and then the Spanish arrive. The world changes completely. What were those first encounters actually like?
The very first reports came in 1518. News of Europeans Juan de Grijalva's expedition landing on the East Coast, which was technically Aztec territory.
Yeah.
Moctezuma was informed straight away, posted extra guards. He was aware something new was happening.
So when Cortez landed in 1519, Moctezuma knew immediately.
Oh, yes. Swiftly informed. He sent emissaries, like Tentlil, to meet them, figure out who they were, what they wanted. But crucially, as Cortez marched inland, he made that alliance with Tlaxcala.
Moctezuma's main enemy.
Exactly. And the Tlaxcalans immediately started stirring up trouble, encouraging revolts in towns under Aztec control. So Moctezuma knew these weren't just random visitors, they were aligning with his enemies.
What about the gifts Moctezuma sent? Weren't they signs of submission?
Unlikely. Sending lavish gifts was a standard way for powerful rulers in Mesoamerica to assert their own status and superiority. It was likely more about showing his wealth and power, maybe trying to impress or intimidate them, or perhaps even subtly bribe them to leave. Less about fear, more about assessment and diplomacy, albeit a diplomacy Cortez didn't understand or care about.
Okay, so then the famous meeting, November 8th, 1519. What really happened there?
They met on the causeway leading into Tenochtitlan, exchanged gifts, again that famous Aztec calendar, gold and silver discs, which, as you mentioned, Cortez later just melted down.
Yeah. Symbolic. Now, Cortez claims Moctezuma basically handed over the empire right then and there.
That's Cortez's account, yes. He claims Moctezuma volunteered to cede his realm to Charles V. But we have to be critical of that. Spanish law at the time kind of required enemies to be declared rebels before a just war could be waged. So Cortez had a strong motive to portray Moctezuma as willingly submitting first, then later rebelling.
So what do other sources say? Indigenous accounts.
Indigenous accounts, written decades later, do include phrases that sound a bit like submission. Something like, "You have come to sit on your seat of authority, which I have kept for you."
Which sounds like giving up power.
It does, to our ears. But in the Nahua cultural context, that kind of extremely polite, almost self-deprecating language could actually be a way of asserting dominance, like saying, you finally arrived to acknowledge my rightful place. Very different meaning.
That completely changes the interpretation and undermines the whole Quetzalcoatl myth, right? The idea he thought Cortez was a god returning.
Absolutely. That Quetzalcoatl story is now widely seen by historians as a post-conquest justification, maybe pushed by some Spanish missionaries or even indigenous groups trying to make sense of the devastating defeat. It simplifies Moctezuma into a superstitious fool, which the evidence doesn't really support. He was likely engaging in complex political theater.
Okay, so they meet, there's this ambiguity, and then just days later, Moctezuma is a prisoner in his own palace. How did that happen? Why?
It was incredibly fast, just 6 days after Cortés arrived. The Spanish excuse was an attack by an Aztec tribute collector named Qualpopoca on a Spanish-allied Totonac town where some Spaniards were killed.
An excuse?
Well, even some Spaniards at the time thought it was thin. Cortés himself later admitted, pretty bluntly, that the main reason he seized Moctezuma was tactical. He needed a high-value hostage to ensure his own safety, knowing his small force was deep inside a massive, potentially hostile city.
So it was about control, not justice for the attack.
Almost certainly. Moctezuma denied ordering the attack. Qualpopoca, before the Spanish burned him alive, apparently confirmed Moctezuma was innocent. But it didn't matter. Moctezuma remained a prisoner.
What was his life like in captivity? Was he just locked in a cell?
No, apparently he was treated with outward respect, still lived in relative comfort within his palace complex. But he had no real power. The Spanish watched his every move, controlled who he saw. He was essentially a figurehead under house arrest.
And he even helped the Spanish sometimes, like arresting Cacamatzin.
He did. Whether out of fear, strategy, or maybe a sense of responsibility to avoid more bloodshed, we don't know. But it definitely angered the Aztec nobility. They saw their emperor diminished, cooperating with these invaders. Tensions were rising rapidly.
And then Cortés leaves.
Right, April 1520. Cortés dashes off to the coast to fight another Spanish force sent to arrest him, led by Pánfilo de Narváez. He leaves Pedro de Alvarado in charge in Tenochtitlan.
And Alvarado makes things much worse.
Disastrously worse. During a major religious festival, Alvarado orders the massacre in the Great Temple, slaughtering hundreds, maybe thousands of unarmed Mexican nobles and priests. After that, the city explodes in revolt, and Moctezuma goes from being a strategic prisoner to just a hostage in the middle of a war zone.
This leads us to the end. June 1520. His death is, well, it's contested, isn't it? How did he actually die?
It's incredibly contested. We have starkly different accounts. The Spanish conquistador Bernal Díaz del Castillo gives one famous version.
What's his story?
Díaz says the Spanish brought Moctezuma out onto a palace balcony, hoping he could calm his people who were besieging the palace. But the crowd had turned against him, already named his brother Cuitlahuac as the new emperor. Díaz claims they shouted insults and threw stones, hitting Moctezuma 3 times, head, arm, leg. He supposedly died from those injuries a few days later.
And Díaz says the Spanish were upset.
Yes, Díaz paints this picture of Cortés and the soldiers weeping for him, calling him the best king they ever had, which, given the circumstances, might be slightly self-serving.
Okay, so that's the Spanish soldiers' view. What about indigenous perspectives?
Very different. The Florentine Codex, compiled by Sahagún working with indigenous informants decades later, flatly states the Spanish killed him. It says they just threw his body, along with another nobleman's, out of the palace after he was dead.
Threw his body out?
Yes. And Salfranc mentions his body was later taken and cremated at a place called Copulco. Then you have Diego Duran, a Dominican friar, who also used indigenous sources. He notes that Spanish accounts blame Aztec projectiles, but his sources claim the Spanish stabbed Moctezuma to death.
Stabbed him?
Yes, and then some other indigenous annals just say the Aztecs found him strangled inside the palace. So stones, stabbing, strangling, we have multiple conflicting causes of death attributed to both sides. We just don't know for sure.
A deeply unclear end to a complex reign. What happened right after he died?
Chaos. His death, however it happened, occurred just before or during the Noche Triste, the Sad Night, when the Spanish tried to flee to Tenochtitlan and were massacred on the causeways. They barely escaped at Tlaxcala.
And his successors?
His brother Cuitlahuac took over, but died very quickly from smallpox, which was already ravaging the city. Then his nephew, the young Cuauhtémoc, became the last Aztec emperor, leading the final resistance until the empire fell in August 1521.
What about Moctezuma's own children?
Some accounts suggest his sons who were with the Spanish were actually killed by Aztecs during the Noche Triste, perhaps seen as collaborators. But he had many children. Several survived, including daughters like Isabel Moctezuma.
And how has history remembered Moctezuma himself? The depictions seem all over the place.
Completely. Bernal Díaz gives us that noble, tragic figure. Cortés portrays him as willingly submitting, which served Cortés's own political needs and fed into that Quetzalcoatl myth.
And Sahagún's Florentine Codex
Often portrays him as weak-willed, overly superstitious, indecisive, almost a scapegoat for the defeat. Though some scholars argue this might reflect indigenous ways of depicting leaders overwhelmed by terrible omens or fright, rather than just a personal failing.
So even the indigenous accounts aren't uniform.
Not at all. Many post-conquest accounts do describe him being fearful, deeply affected by omens, comets, burning temples, a ghostly weeping woman. This often connects to what some call the myth of native desolation, a way of rationalizing the seemingly incomprehensible defeat after the fact.
Fascinating how memory gets shaped. What about him personally? Any interesting details beyond the imperial image?
There are some nuggets. He apparently had numerous wives and concubines. Maybe exaggerated Spanish accounts claimed hundreds of children and pregnant wives, but certainly many. We know of Queens Tlapalequisaquen and Tetlocco. His daughter, Isabel Moctezuma, became a prominent figure after the conquest.
And his habits?
Obsessed with cleanliness, apparently. Bathed multiple times a day.
Yeah.
Physically active, too. Practiced archery, swimming. Was an avid hunter. And famously, he supposedly consumed vast quantities of chocolate daily, maybe 60 portions, often flavored with vanilla or chili.
60 portions. Wow. Okay, so what is his lasting legacy today?
It's multifaceted. His descendants are still around, in Mexico and Spain. Some Spanish nobles hold titles like Duke of Moctezuma Titeltengo. Isabel Moctezuma received a large estate from Cortez, married several Spaniards, and her descendants founded prominent families. A recent Mexican Secretary of Education, Esteban Moctezuma, is a descendant.
So a direct lineage still exists?
Yes, and in indigenous folklore, he's sometimes worshipped as a kind of earth deity, particularly among groups like the Otomi, Tipuhuan, and Nahua. There are myths about him returning one day. His name has also been invoked in later indigenous rebellions as a symbol of leadership or resistance.
And culturally?
He pops up everywhere. He's the title character in multiple 18th century operas. There's a modern opera by Roger Sessions, novels like The Fair God. Neil Young's song Cortez the Killer, though historically problematic, references him. There's even a statue of him on the Royal Palace in Madrid.
And the, less flattering reference.
Yes. Montezuma's Revenge. The colloquialism for traveler's diarrhea. Plus countless places, animals, plants named after him. His name endures in many different ways. Hashtag, tag, outro.
So after digging through all this, what's the big picture? How should we really think about Moctezuma II?
I think the main takeaway is complexity. He wasn't just one thing. He was clearly a powerful, intelligent, ambitious ruler. He centralized his empire. He fought numerous wars. He built magnificent structures. He was a product of his time and culture. But he was also dealt an incredibly difficult hand. Those massive natural disasters early in his reign, the deep internal rivalries, and then this completely unprecedented invasion from across the ocean. No leader could have been fully prepared for that collision of worlds. And the conflicting accounts of his personality, his actions, his death, they really underscore how difficult it is to get a clear picture when history is written or rewritten by winners and losers through such different cultural lenses.
It seems his story is trapped between the need for a simple narrative, either hero or villain, strong or weak, and the much messier reality. He remains an enigma.
He really does. And this deep dive, I hope, shows just how much perspective shapes our understanding. If the Spanish hadn't arrived, or if we had more purely Mexica sources from before the fall, how different might our view of his reign be?
That leads to a final thought for you, our listener. When you encounter these pivotal figures caught in moments of immense upheaval, how do you navigate those competing stories? How do you try to find your own understanding of who they were and what their impact truly was beyond the myths?
We hope exploring Moctezuma II through these different sources is giving you a richer, maybe more challenging, but ultimately more informed perspective on one of history's most fascinating and debated emperors. Imagine a place on Earth, a kind of borderland, really. Sometimes it's even called the coast to a desert. It's a region you hear about a lot, constantly in the news. But it feels like its real complexity, its history, its global importance.
Yeah.
It often gets lost. Today, we're taking a deep dive into exactly that place, the Sahel region of Africa. It's this huge strip of land, incredibly important geographically, climatically, culturally, and understanding it Well, it's kind of a shortcut to being genuinely informed about a part of the world that really shapes global conversations.
Exactly. And that's our mission today, to sort of peel back those layers of the Sahel. We're not just going to list facts. We want to connect the dots for you, give you insights into what makes this region such a complex tapestry. You've got geography, climate, history, culture, all woven together. We've gone through a lot of sources to pull out the key things, to help you grasp not just what the Sahel is, but why it matters so much.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting with just the sheer scale. When you think about the Sahel, it's this huge belt, right? Stretching, 5,900 kilometers? That's over 3,600 miles. Incredible. From the Atlantic all the way across to the Red Sea.
Yeah, it's vast.
And it covers more than 3 million square kilometers. Takes in parts of so many countries. We hear about Mali, Niger, Sudan, Senegal, Chad.
Burkina Faso, Mauritania. The list goes on. It really is a colossal stretch. And the key thing to understand, I think, is its ecological role. It's what we call a biogeographical transition zone.
Okay, transition zone. What does that mean exactly?
Think of it like a natural buffer, yeah, a kind of dynamic borderland. It sits right between the super dry Sahara Desert to the north and then the more humid savannas, the Sudanian region, further south.
Right. So it's not quite desert, not quite savanna.
Precisely. It has this hot, semi-arid climate. There's a specific classification, Köppen Esch. It means it's consistently hot and dry, but yeah, not a full-blown desert. And knowing that difference is absolutely crucial for understanding the unique environmental pressures it faces.
And the landscape itself, you mentioned it's vast, but it's also quite unique.
Very much so.
Our sources describe it as mostly flat. Generally, between 200 and 400 meters elevation. Though you do get some dramatic exceptions, like the Air Mountains.
Right, those stand out.
And the plants.
Yeah.
Mostly grasslands, savannas, dominated by these incredibly tough annual grasses.
Survivors.
But the trees are what really define it, aren't they? Those iconic drought-tolerant acacias, the massive baobabs.
Absolutely. Though it's a tough existence. During the long, dry season, many trees lose their leaves. The grasses just die back. Waiting, hoping for those rains, which are often so unpredictable. It's a landscape shaped by that cycle, by adaptation. And that adaptation, that whole delicate ecosystem, it once supported an incredible range of animal life. And this is where it gets quite tragic, actually. Well, the Sahel used to be home to huge populations of large grazers, antelopes, gazelles, and their predators. Imagine herds of scimitar-horned or ekiks. They're probably extinct in the wild now. The Dama gazelle, critically endangered. African wild dogs, also endangered.
Wow. Lions, cheetahs, too.
Yeah, lions and cheetahs roam there, too, yes. But sadly, overhunting and just intense competition with growing numbers of livestock, it's decimated these populations. We've seen actual extinctions, like a prehistoric buffalo species, Pelorovis, and the booble hartebeest.
It's stark.
It really is. And it's not just, sad for the animals themselves. It shows how quickly human pressures can unravel a region's ecological resilience. It impacts everything, the soil, local economies.
Yeah.
It fundamentally changes the whole system.
These environmental pressures, they tie directly into the climate. And you said this is where it gets really interesting and, pretty brutal.
Yeah, brutal is a good word for it sometimes.
Constant, intense heat. And the sunshine, it's almost unbelievable. Approaching desert levels, right? Like 2,400 to 3,600 hours a year.
Huge amounts of sun.
But then contrast that with the rain. It's incredibly low, extremely irregular, typically only 200 to 700 millimeters annually.
That's the average range, yes.
And it all falls in this really short, unpredictable window. Like 4 to 6 months.
If you're lucky, yeah. It's a land of extremes, absolutely. And this isn't new for the Sahel. It has this long, often harsh history of droughts, even mega droughts.
Mega droughts.
Yeah, the sources mention one that lasted an incredible 250 years, from about 1450 to 1700.
Wow, 2.5 centuries.
Hard to imagine. And more recently, there was a major drought back in 1914 that caused widespread famine. Then came what they call the long drought period, roughly 1968 to 1974. That led to really unsustainable grazing, stripping the land bare, and triggered another massive famine. That famine was actually what spurred the creation of IAGI, the International Fund for Agricultural Development.
Okay. So these events have had long-lasting institutional impacts, too.
Definitely. They've deeply shaped the region, its people, their ways of life, and how the world tries to respond.
And we don't even have to go back that far. I mean, 2010, that severe famine, crops just failed everywhere because of the heat.
Terrible year.
In Niger alone, what was it, 350,000 people facing starvation, 1.2 million at risk.
Staggering numbers.
And the temperatures then were just off the charts.
Yeah.
Chad hit 47.6 Celsius, Sudan nearly 50 degrees, 49.6 C.
Yeah, truly scorching.
It's heartbreaking when you read the reports, children dying.
Yeah.
It really underscores the human cost of these climate extremes.
And this feeds directly into those critical environmental challenges we talked about, desertification and really severe soil loss.
Right, the land turning to desert.
Exactly. And human factors, overfarming, overgrazing, just too many people trying to survive on marginal lands, they make the natural soil erosion much, much worse.
A vicious cycle.
It is. It's a devastating feedback loop. But what's also important to mention are the innovative responses. People aren't just passive victims. There's the Woodless Construction Project, for instance. It's been going since 1980, promoting alternative building methods.
To save trees.
Precisely. Reducing the need for scarce timber, helping protect that fragile tree cover. And then there's the really ambitious Great Green Wall.
Ah, yes, I've heard of that. Planting trees across the continent.
That's the idea. A massive reforestation effort to directly fight desertification. Huge undertaking. But even with these efforts, the region still deals with frequent major dust storms, often kicking up from places like the Modele Depression in Chad.
How frequent?
On average, maybe 100 days a year, you get significant dust events.
Okay, so you have this picture of drought, desertification. But then there's a surprising twist, right? After those really bad droughts in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
The sources say the Sahel actually saw more rainfall in the following decades. That seems counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? It's genuinely surprising, and it's something scientists are still trying to fully understand.
After centuries of drying trends, what could possibly be behind that?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. This unexpected shift, this regreening in some areas, it really complicates how we think about global warming's effects regionally.
So it might be linked to climate change, but in an unexpected way.
Possibly. Some researchers suggest that changes in large-scale weather patterns could be involved. Maybe stronger monsoons, potentially driven by a warmer Atlantic Ocean, maybe even the Mediterranean playing a role. So the big question is this some kind of natural recovery cycle kicking in? Or is it a more complex, maybe unpredictable shift driven by our wider human impact on the global climate?
Right.
What it really highlights is how complex climate change impacts can be. Not always straightforward decline. Sometimes these unexpected shifts happen. It turns the Sahel into this living laboratory for understanding climate adaptation and resilience in surprising ways.
Fascinating. Let's shift gears a bit from the climate to the culture, the people. How have they adapted traditionally?
Well, for centuries, many people in the Sahel have practiced a semi-nomadic lifestyle. It's called transhumance.
Transhumans. Okay.
Yeah, it's this really ingenious system. They move their livestock, cattle, goats, camels between different areas depending on the season.
Following the resources.
Exactly. They move north during the brief wet season, where the grazing is richer then. And then they head south, where there's more vegetation during the long dry season.
A really smart adaptation to that volatile environment.
Yes, it is. And as we talk about the people and their lives, the sources we looked at also mention some specific social practices.
Okay.
Particularly in the Western Sahel, things like polygamy, child marriage, and female genital mutilation are reported as being common in some communities. It's just part of the picture presented in the material, showing some of the diverse and sometimes challenging social dynamics within the region.
Right. So with all this history, the movement of people, colonial legacies, what does that mean for the languages spoken there? French seems quite widespread.
It is, yes, a very direct result of colonial history in many of these nations. For a long time, French was the official language.
But that's changing now.
It is, quite significantly. Countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, since 2022, they've actually removed French as an official language.
Wow.
Yeah, it signals this broader move to distance themselves politically and culturally from Paris, asserting more linguistic independence. But what's really interesting is how French is used. It often functions more as a lingua franca, a common tongue mostly for business, among the elite, the educated.
Not so much for everyday chat for most people.
Generally not, no. And here's a fascinating twist.
No.
You've got this reverse flow happening now. With African migration and just the huge youth population in the region, West African and Sahelian words are actually being borrowed into standard French.
Really?
Yeah.
French is usually seen as quite resistant to change.
Traditionally very rigid, yes. But this is happening. It's challenging that rigidity. It's like the former colonial language is being reshaped by the very cultures it interacted with, a dynamic exchange.
That's cool. Can you give some examples, like
Yeah.
specific words or ways of speaking?
Sure. Code switching mixing languages is super common. In Burkina Faso's French, for example, you might hear English words like enjoy or even Chinese words like chow or mao popping up, meaning old. You also get loan words integrated, like the Moray word legidi used for money, or the Wolof word nek, which means like good or pleasant, used in phrases like see, nek, it's good.
And pronunciation differences, too.
Definitely. A lot of speakers in the Western Sahel retain this apical trill for the R sound, a rolling R.
Like an older French pronunciation.
Exactly. It gives the French spoken there a really distinct regional flavor. And just quickly, touching on the name Sahel itself, the etymology is quite interesting.
Where does it come from?
It's from Arabic. Al-Sal? It means coast or shore.
Coast. But it's inland.
Right. So it's often taken figuratively like the shore of the Sahara Desert, the edge.
Makes sense.
Though another possibility is it comes from a different Arabic word, sal, which means plain. Either way, it highlights that identity as a borderland, an edge.
Okay, let's step back in time now to look at the deeper history. You mentioned climate shifts earlier.
Yes, major ones. Around 4000 BC, the climate changed dramatically. The Sahara and the Sahel started drying out incredibly fast.
Lakes shrank, rivers too. Desertification sped up.
Exactly. And this huge environmental shift basically pushed early farming communities south and west towards more humid parts of West Africa.
A powerful reminder of how climate has always shaped human movement and history there.
Absolutely. And if you connect that to later periods, you see the rise of these really powerful Sahelian kingdoms between the 9th and 18th centuries.
Like the Mali Empire, Mansa Musa.
The very same. Legendary stuff.
Mm.
Their incredible wealth came from controlling those vital trans-Saharan trade routes, gold, salt, slaves, and their power. It relied heavily on large pack animals, camels for trade, horses for their cavalry, which were key for controlling vast territories.
And cities like Timbuktu, Gao, Djenné flourished then.
Huge centers of trade, scholarship, culture, really important hubs. But it's interesting, these powerful empires often struggle to expand further south into the forested zones.
Why was that?
Well, mounted warriors weren't very effective in dense forests. And crucially, their horses and camels were vulnerable to tropical diseases, like those spread by the tsetse fly.
So the environment itself placed limits, even on these powerful states. Then came the colonial era. The Western Sahel mostly fell under French control, right? Part of French West Africa.
Correct. Chad became part of French Equatorial Africa. The easternmost area, though, had a different history, conquered by Egypt, then later under British rule before Sudan's independence in 1956.
And then decolonization happened mostly around the mid-20th century.
Yeah, for the French territories, mainly around 1960, a period of huge political change. Which brings us, unfortunately, to the really grave modern challenges, and they are truly staggering.
The security situation.
Yes. The Sahel is now tragically often called the epicenter of global terrorism. By 2023, it accounted for over half of all terrorism-related deaths worldwide.
Half. That's shocking.
It is. We've seen the rise and spread of groups like JNM, that's a major al-Qaeda affiliate, Boko Haram, Islamic State affiliates, AQMM, especially intensifying after the chaos following the Libyan crisis in 2011.
And how do these groups sustain themselves?
It's not just ideology. They fund themselves through ransom kidnappings, which are horribly common. Illicit gold mining is huge. And the Sahel has become a major transit route for cocaine smuggling, coming from South America, heading towards Europe. They're plugged into global illicit economies.
And this violence isn't contained.
No, worryingly, it's spilling over into coastal West African countries now, like Togo and Benin, destabilizing a much wider region.
And alongside this violence, you have intense political instability, lots of coups d'etat recently.
A very high prevalence, yes. Military juntas are currently in power in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Sudan.
And that's led to some big shifts in alliances, hasn't it? The sources mention a turn away from Western partners.
A very significant shift. These new regimes are increasingly turning towards Russian mercenaries, the Africa Corps, which used to be the Wagner Group.
Instead of French or other Western forces?
Exactly. And this has led to the collapse of regional counterterrorism alliances, like the G5 Sahel Force. It's fundamentally reshaping the whole geopolitical chessboard there.
And the U.S. has raised concerns about human rights abuses by state security forces, too. How do the sources frame that?
They explain that these concerns often arise from reports about civilian harm during counterterrorism operations. It highlights the immense difficulty these forces face fighting insurgents often embedded within communities.
A terrible dilemma.
It's a deeply complex and tragic situation where distinguishing combatants from civilians is incredibly hard, and abuses sadly do occur amidst the pressure. And it's crucial to connect these conflicts back to the environment again. Things like violent clashes between herders and farmers.
Those are getting worse.
They're often exacerbated by climate change, by the land degradation we talked about, and by rapid population growth putting pressure on resources. It's another feedback loop.
Environmental stress fueling conflict.
Precisely. Environmental stress acts as a catalyst or a threat multiplier for social unrest and violence. You saw it even recently, that extreme heat wave in March, April 2024. It hit Burkina Faso and Mali particularly hard, and studies showed it was significantly intensified by global warming. It's a direct link. Climate change isn't just some future threat, it's actively worsening conditions and contributing to instability right now.
So, bringing this all together, what does this deep dive mean for you, the listener? The Sahel is clearly so much more than just a headline. It's this critical zone, isn't it? Place of profound environmental change, incredibly rich history, evolving cultures, but also facing these immense, complex, modern challenges.
Absolutely.
It's where nature, history, global politics all collide, often dramatically.
Yeah.
And what happens there really does ripple outwards across the globe.
Yeah. The Sahel truly is a stark, living example of how all these global forces, climate, history, geopolitics, culture, they all converge in one place. And they profoundly shape the lives and futures of millions of people. Understanding it properly, deeply, it's not just about knowing the facts and figures. It's about seeing the incredible resilience, the constant struggle for adaptation against huge odds. The Sahel's intricate story, its complexity, it reveals so much about how human actions and environmental shifts are intertwined. It shows us challenges, yes, but also that incredible human spirit of survival, of innovation. So maybe the final thought is, what does this region's complex dance between crisis and adaptation really teach us about our shared future on a changing planet? What lessons are there in the Sahel story for all of us? You know, when we think of Sparta, a really vivid image probably springs to mind, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely.
Maybe it's those iconic warriors from 300, all ripped abs in defiance.
Right, or maybe the Spartan race people talk about.
Exactly. Or even, Kratos in God of War Ragnarok mentioning his unbelievably harsh upbringing. These, modern takes paint this picture of fierce, almost superhuman people.
Forged in fire, basically.
Yeah, forged through some kind of training regimen, that sounds. Well, unlike anything else, so today we're going to do a deep dive into the historical reality behind that legend, behind the mystique, the Agoge, that's A-G-O-G-E. It was the ancient Spartan system for education and military training. Our mission really is to strip away the myths and unpack what the system actually involved.
Its purpose, the day-to-day stuff.
Exactly. Its purpose, its daily realities, and, its surprising, sometimes pretty disturbing echoes even today in history and pop culture.
And we're drawing on quite a lot here, right?
Well,
Ancient sources, modern scholarship.
Yeah, we're looking at a really comprehensive set of sources, including a detailed Wikipedia article on the Agoge, which pulls together people like Plutarch and Xenophon, those ancient historians, but also, importantly, modern scholars giving their analysis.
And what's really striking, I think, is that while the modern images are powerful, the historical Agoge, it was, in many ways, even more extreme.
More extreme? How so?
Well, it wasn't just about making warriors. It was about shaping an entire society, forging this collective identity in a way that very few other cultures have ever really tried.
Okay, wow. That's a powerful way to frame it. So let's start peeling back these layers then. The classical Agoge, it sounds like this incredibly brutal, non-negotiable path to actually being a Spartan citizen.
Yeah.
Can you lay out the fundamentals for us?
Absolutely. So at its heart, the Agoge was the mandatory state-run training program. Every single Spartiate boy that's the citizen class had to go through it to get full citizenship.
And they started young.
Incredibly young. Boys entered the system at age 7. And they stayed under the Agoge's direct control until they were 21. But even then, full citizenship,
Yeah.
the right to vote, join the assembly, really be part of civic life that didn't kick in until they were 30.
7 years old. That's primary school age. And our sources, they don't pull any punches, do they? They describe it as notoriously violent.
Yeah, even by ancient standards, which were, let's face it, often pretty rough.
Right.
It was a system built on deliberate deprivation. They were intentionally kept short of food, sleep, even proper shelter. And critically, they were strictly cut off from their birth families.
So it's not just physical toughening, it's psychological too.
Oh, profoundly.
Yeah.
It was a form of social re-engineering. And the sources mention, chillingly, that it was sometimes fatal. People died in this training.
That's a stark look into the Spartan mindset. So who actually went through this? Was it every boy born in Sparta?
Oh, no, not at all. Far from it. This intense regime was exclusively for the sons of Spartiates, full citizens and mothers from that same Spartiate class. And this group was actually a tiny fraction of the whole population, maybe, a tenth or possibly even less at certain times.
So most people didn't go through it.
Exactly. Girls were completely excluded. The Helots, who were Sparta's large enslaved population, were out. And the Mothaks, free non-citizens, they were excluded too.
Any exceptions at all?
Very rare ones. You had the Trophimoi. These were usually very well-connected foreigners, like
Wow.
Xenophon's own sons apparently went through a version of it. Maybe the Syntrophoi, children of Helot mothers who were adopted by Spartiates. But these were really fringe cases.
Okay, so that distinction really drives home that this was about forging a very specific elite ruling class.
Absolutely.
And the name itself, Agoge, what does that tell us?
Well, the word agoge comes from the ancient Greek verb aku, which means to lead or to guide.
Ah, okay.
So it translates pretty well as training or upbringing or maybe even discipline. Its origins are usually tied to the semi-mythical lawgiver like Kyrgyz. Scholars generally think it was properly set up sometime in the 7th or 6th century BC.
So, really early on. Baked into Spartan identity from the start.
Seems that way. Deeply embedded.
Okay, so from entering at 7 all the way to 30 for full citizenship, that sounds like a relentless journey. Our sources break it down into 3 main stages, right? Let's start with the first one. The PAIDS, that's P-A-I-D-E-S. Ages 7 to 14. These sound like the foundational and maybe the most terrifying years.
Absolutely. Terrifying is probably a good word. I mean, yes, they got some basic reading and writing, but the curriculum just immediately pivoted to war skills.
Right away.
Right away. Athletic stuff, running, wrestling, even things like choral dance, which sounds odd, but was about discipline and moving together. It was education for war from day one,
Yeah.
not just physically, but culturally too.
And here's where it gets really fascinating and kind of unsettling. The food thing. Deliberately underfeeding them and encouraging them to steal food.
Yes. Xenophon talks about this. If boys got caught stealing food for themselves or their older group leaders, the Irones, they were beaten.
But the beating wasn't for the stealing itself, was it? That's the weird part.
Exactly. You got it. The punishment was for being clumsy enough to get caught. It tells you so much about Spartan values, right? It was a lesson in stealth, in resourcefulness, cunning, all seen as vital skills for a warrior. Operating behind enemy lines, surviving rough conditions. It's practical, tactical thinking.
And the physical toughening just sounds brutal. Barefoot, 1 cloak a year, sleeping on reeds.
That's right. They trained barefoot to toughen their feet, make them agile on any ground. From age 12, just 1 cloak for the whole year, rain or shine, heat or cold. Plutarch gives us that image of them sleeping together in their groups, the Agili. On beds they literally made themselves by pulling reeds from the river Eurotas.
Wow.
Every single detail was designed to build this almost superhuman resilience and hardiness. Nothing was left to chance.
We also hear about laconism, that famous Spartan brevity, the witty short phrases. Was that part of the Agoge training too?
Oh, very much so. It was a key part of their communication training. The French historian Jean Ducat points out that Aristotle believes Spartans weren't just taught to speak concisely, but also how to tease effectively, and maybe more importantly, how to take teasing.
Ah, interesting. Thick skin required.
Absolutely. It fostered that sharp, practical, no-nonsense communication style that mirrored their whole approach to life.
Okay, this next bit is, well, it's controversial, isn't it? The institutionalized relationships with older men, the Erastes. Our ancient sources seem to give different takes here.
Yeah, they really do. And this is where history gets complex, right? It shows us that even primary sources can disagree, forcing us to kind of grapple with ambiguity and different cultural norms.
So what are the differing accounts?
Well, Plutarch, writing quite a bit later, described these relationships involving an older warrior, the Erastes, and a promising youth, the Aramanos. He saw them as erotic, but also with a clear, instructive purpose mentorship. Xenophon, though, who was actually around during the classical Agoge, claimed Lycurgus's laws strictly banned sexual relationships between them. Although even Xenophon admits this was pretty unusual compared to other Greek cities at the time.
So it's a historical debate we can't definitively settle.
Pretty much.
Right.
It highlights how culture and interpretations could vary even back then. It's complex stuff.
Right. Okay, so moving on from those intense paydays years, the boys then hit the next stage, the pediskoi. That's ages 15 to 19. This sounds like a really critical transition point.
It really was. This phase marked a big shift in loyalty. Their main focus moved away from their childhood group, the Aegulae, towards the Sicyon.
The common mess hall.
Exactly. Where the adult Spartan men ate together, socialized, built those crucial bonds. And scholars often suggest that the Erastes, the older mentor figure, played a key role here, maybe sponsoring his younger partner, the Aramanos, into one of these dining groups.
So kind of like getting into the right club. Sort of, yeah. A very serious club. And of course, the physical training, the athletic competitions, all that just kept going, getting even more intense. Always preparing for that next step.
And then finally, they become Habuntes, Hebontes, ages 20 to 29. These are the young men right on the edge of full citizenship. What changes for them?
Okay, so at 20, a Spartan becomes an Arion. And if he'd shown real leadership potential during all that training,
Which must have been constantly assessed.
constantly, he might actually get put in charge of an Aegulae of younger boys, so he becomes a mentor himself, passing on the system.
Ah, the cycle continues.
Precisely. And these Habundes, they're now eligible for military service. They can vote in the assembly. But, and this is important, they weren't quite full adult citizens yet. They were still technically under the authority of the Paidanamos.
The overall supervisor of the Agoge.
That's the one. We'll come back to him. But yeah, still under his watch.
Now, this stage, the Habunde stage, also had some really specialized and frankly quite chilling units. I'm thinking of the Cryptia first. What on earth was that? Yeah, the Cryptia. It was this sort of shadowy, almost secret police force. Its main job seems to have been controlling the Hilit population, the enslaved people, often through violence and intimidation.
Secret police, basically.
Pretty much. There's a big debate among scholars about its primary function, though. Was it mainly an initiation ritual for these young men testing their stealth, their ruthlessness, as Pierre Vidal-Naquet suggested?
Yes.
Or was it mostly just a brutal tool of state terror to keep the huge Hilit population down, which David Dodd argues? Plutarch gives accounts of the Cryptia carrying out, brutal killings, but then Plato, writing about ideal states, doesn't mention them at all.
Which is interesting in itself.
Very. That silence speaks volumes, perhaps.
And then there were the Hippes, another elite group from this age bracket.
Yes, the Hippes, which literally means cavalrymen, but confusingly, they were actually an elite infantry unit.
Okay, not confusing at all.
Yeah, welcome to ancient history. It consisted of 300 top Habuntes, and Xenophon describes this very public selection process for them.
Public.
He says it was designed specifically to create intense rivalry between different groups of candidates. The idea, according to Xenophon, was that this rivalry encouraged them to constantly watch each other and report any wrongdoing, a kind of self-policing mechanism to keep discipline sky high.
Wow. Intense competition built right into the system.
Absolutely, at every level.
So with this huge, complex, relentless system running from age 7 right up to almost 30, who was the ultimate boss? Who kept the whole thing running?
That job belonged to the Paidanamos. The title literally means something like boy herder or supervisor of children.
Right.
This wasn't just any official. It was an upper-class magistrate, a Spartiate, with immense authority over the entire Agoge.
And they handled punishment.
Well, they had the ultimate authority to punish, yes.
Yeah.
But often, the actual physical discipline was delegated to the Mascophoroi whip bearers, who were usually chosen from the Hydumes themselves.
So older trainees punishing the younger ones under supervision.
Exactly. Plutarch even mentions the Paidanamos watching how an Iron disciplined younger boys, sort of assessing if the punishment was appropriate by Spartan standards.
And Xenophon makes a point about comparing this role to other Greek cities, right?
He does, and it's quite telling. Xenophon stresses that the Spartan Paidanamos was always a free man, a high-ranking citizen official. This was very different from other Greek city-states, where tutors or supervisors of children, the pedagogoi, were often slaves.
Ah, okay. So that really underlines how central and state-controlled the Agoge was in Sparta.
Absolutely. It wasn't just a private family matter like elsewhere. It was a core pillar of the state itself.
So when we pull back and look at all this, the immense hardship, the deprivation, the rigid structure, the big question is, what was the ultimate point of it all? It feels like more than just making tough soldiers.
Exactly. It's easy to just focus on the military aspect.
Yeah.
But the Agoge seems to have had this really crucial dual purpose. So Plutarch emphasizes the first obvious one. Those intense physical trials were absolutely about preparing their bodies for the sheer brutality of ancient warfare. And the constant competitions were meant to encourage hard work and reward merit.
Makes sense. But the second purpose?
The historian Stephen Hodkinson argues, and I think convincingly, that there was a second equally vital aim to instill this deep, unwavering, collective Spartan identity.
The identity piece again.
Yes. By systematically keeping boys away from their families, from individual ties, the Agoge taught them to prioritize the community, the state, the populace, above any individual needs or desires.
So it wasn't just physical training.
No.
Yeah.
It was Sparta's ultimate identity-forging machine. It was meticulously designed to basically strip away individual will and hardwire total loyalty to the Spartan state and its very unique, rigid social norms.
So finishing the Agoge wasn't just about getting your citizen card punched. It defined what being a Spartiate was.
Precisely. It meant you'd mastered both the physical stuff and these deeply ingrained social rules and expectations. It was total indoctrination, really.
The crucible of Spartan identity, as you said earlier.
Exactly that.
And I noticed the sources also mention things that sound almost like rituals, like religious activities mixed in with the training.
That's right, yeah. There was significant overlap. For instance, those pediskoi, the teenagers, were apparently made to threaten steel cheeses from the altar at the sanctuary of Artemis Orthia.
Steal from an altar.
Yes. And if they were caught, they were whipped, sometimes severely. This might have been some kind of violent initiation rite as they moved towards the Haibuntes stage.
Okay.
And you also had things like the Gymnopedia Festival. This is a public event with choral singing and athletic contests performed by naked youths. Boys in the Agoge would participate as part of their training, reinforcing that collective identity within a kind of sacred public setting.
Wow. So this incredible system, it must have changed over time, though, right? It couldn't have stayed exactly the same for centuries.
No, absolutely not. Its fortunes actually waxed and waned quite dramatically. It seems to have declined quite a bit in the 3rd century BCE, maybe as the number of Spartiate citizens fell.
But it came back.
It did. There was a big revival under King Cleomenes III around 226 BCE. But then, less than 40 years later, it was forcibly abolished by Philip Pullman when Sparta had to join the Achaean League.
Abolished. But then,
surprise, surprise, it was restored again after Sparta came under Roman control in 146 BCE. Quite a roller coaster.
So the Romans bring it back. That's fascinating. But was it the same Agoge? Or had it become something else?
It had definitely changed. Under Roman rule, the Agoge became, kind of ironically, almost a tourist attraction.
A tourist attraction? Seriously?
Yeah, presented as this authentic slice of Sparta's glorious, harsh past. But it certainly adapted. For example, the age groups were different. Maybe the stages weren't quite the same. Even the names for the groups of boys changed. They started using terms like bua instead of the classical age light.
But did it keep its brutal reputation?
Oh, yes. It definitely maintained the brutality. Cicero, the Roman orator, famously describes seeing boys being savagely whipped naked at that same altar of Artemis Orthia, almost like a public performance.
Good grief.
And there was this thing called the Planetastes game. Basically, a super violent team contest fought on a small island in the river. Things like that reinforced the Roman view of Spartans as uniquely harsh and warlike. It was like living history, but extremely painful living history.
It sounds like the Romans were kind of fascinated, maybe even romanticized the sheer brutality of it all.
I think that's fair to say.
So how has the Agoge been viewed more broadly, across history, beyond just the ancient world?
Well, its reputation was huge even back then. Thucydides mentions how famous it was throughout Greece. And interestingly, big thinkers like Plato and Aristotle actually praised elements of it when they were writing about, the ideal city-state. They saw something valuable in its structure and discipline.
But not everyone agreed.
No. Plutarch, writing later in the Roman era, was much more critical. He really emphasized the brutality, the indoctrination aspect, and he pointed out how limited the education was. Just enough reading and writing for practical purposes, nothing more. So even in antiquity, you see the split view.
And that split definitely continues into modern times, sometimes with really chilling results. Our sources point to some disturbing interpretations in the 19th and 20th centuries.
Yeah, absolutely chilling is the right word.
Yeah.
In the early 20th century, you start seeing the Agoge being idealized, especially for creating military might. There were direct comparisons made to the Royal Prussian Cadets in Germany.
Mhm.
A German novel called Spartan Youths explicitly linked them.
Okay.
Then fast forward to Weimar Germany after World War I. The sacrifice of Leonidas and the 300 at Thermopylae gets dragged in to justify the immense German war losses, with their supposed mental strength chalked up to the Agoge's training.
And then the Nazi era. That connection is particularly grim.
It is deeply disturbing. In the 1930s, you had Nazi-aligned academics like Professor Helmut Berv openly praising the Spartan system for, in his view, weeding out the unfit and creating these perfectly unified, obedient warriors for the state.
Horrifying.
And these ideas apparently struck a chord with Hitler himself.
Yeah.
The Agoge was actually taught as a model in the Adolf Hitler Schule, the elite Nazi schools.
Yeah.
It was seen as a blueprint for maintaining power through, rigorously trained, tough, obedient cadres.
It's a really stark reminder of how historical stories, especially about strength and discipline, can be twisted and misused.
A truly sobering example, how narratives can be co-opted for totalitarian ends.
And yet, despite that dark legacy, the idea of the Agoge still pops up in modern pop culture, doesn't it? Often in quite different, maybe more romanticized ways.
Oh, absolutely. It's still out there. You've got the physical endurance events run by Spartan Race Inc., explicitly called Agoge events. It appears in science fiction, like Pierce Brown's Red Rising series. And of course, its depiction in movies like 300 is hugely influential, even if historically questionable. Even in video games like God of War Ragnarok, the main character, Kratos, talks about his Spartan upbringing and its cruelty.
So it clearly still resonates.
It does. It's lodged deep in our collective imagination, often simplified, sometimes romanticized, but definitely still there.
But alongside those pop culture takes, there are also really important critical analyses from modern historians offering a counter-narrative, right?
Yes, absolutely vital perspectives. For example, historian Brett Devereaux makes a very stark comparison between the Spartan Agoge and the methods used to indoctrinate and brutalize child soldiers in some modern conflicts.
Wow, that's a powerful comparison.
It is. It provides this crucial ethical lens, stripping away any lingering romance and forcing us to confront the profound human cost and the deeply problematic ethics of a system like the Agoge.
So, okay, we've journeyed through the Agoge. From ancient Sparta through Roman times, its dark 20th century interpretations, and into modern culture. Looking back at all of that, what's the main takeaway for us today? What should we remember?
Well, I think what's truly profound here, and what we need to grasp, is that the Agoge was so much more than just boot camp.
Right.
It was this all-encompassing, meticulously engineered system. Its purpose was to fundamentally strip away individual identity and forge a very specific type of person, a citizen, utterly, unquestioningly loyal to the Spartan state.
Through any means necessary, it sounds like.
Through intense, sometimes lethal physical, social, and psychological conditioning. It wasn't just about making them strong soldiers. It was about making them Spartan in every single fiber of their being, like perfect cogs in this perfectly obedient state machine.
And understanding that, understanding the harsh reality, the singular purpose, and this really complex, sometimes ugly legacy from being praised by philosophers to being used by Nazis, that helps you, the listener, critically examine how societies are shaped, doesn't it?
Exactly. It shows how these powerful narratives about strength, discipline, national unity, how they get woven into a society's fabric. And, maybe more importantly, how easily they can be twisted or co-opted, sometimes with absolutely devastating consequences.
So here's a final thought to leave you with, considering everything we've talked about today. This incredibly intense, state-run upbringing designed to create such a specific kind of person. What elements of that kind of deep societal conditioning, maybe aimed at fostering loyalty or conformity, do you think we might still see reflected in our own modern world, perhaps in ways that are far more subtle or maybe even completely unrecognized?